father was going to open up, well, he had a hardware store with my mother's brother in Portland, and they decided to go their separate ways. And he was actually going to go back to Chehalis and open up a hardware store there, but it turned out he didn't, and he ended up coming to Camas on the last minute and opened up a hardware store in 1950. Moved in 1949 when I was like 5 and a half, maybe. Oh, wow. I had my own businesses when I was a kid. In junior high and high school, in my locker, I bought candy from the local grocery store lady, Mrs. Carneth, and I doubled the price and put them in. I sold all the fat kids, and that's probably not politically correct, but anyway, I sold a lot of candy, made money. I had a worm farm, sold worms to the fishermen and some retail outlets, sold firecrackers. That was fun. Even if I didn't sell them, I could use them for something. But and then I worked for my father in the hardware store. I delivered papers for the Post-Record and the Columbian both. And when I went to college, when I went up to Washington State, I worked in the paper mill, and I was able to buy bond paper, which is good quality paper. And people, you had to type up all their thesis on it back then. This is all done the old-fashioned way with it. Anyway, I bought over a ton of it, 14 pounds at a time, and then I took it up to Washington State and resold that and made good money on that. I sold women's fashion. I worked for a company out of Cleveland for a couple years. Of course, I worked in the paper mill all the way through high school. I mean, not high school, but through college. I actually put six years at the mill because I went to school for quite a few years. What was that? Then I bought the business. I bought my father out in 1970, and I owned that for 27 years, sold it 21 years ago, and kind of retired now. Got some rental property. I kept busy. Not really. I've had a pretty easy life. Things worked out really well. It's Camas has changed from a mill town. I mean, it really was a mill town back in the 50s. It was a town of 5,000 people and 20-some hundred working in the mill. So everybody knew everybody because somebody had somebody working in the mill, and most likely an uncle, a brother, an aunt, a wife, whatever. So everybody knew everybody pretty much. I was just up at the cemetery for Memorial Day the last couple of days, cleaning up a couple of graves, and there's so many families I know. You don't see them anymore around here, but you don't realize back in the 50s and 60s, they were just certain families. They were just all over the place, and they didn't move if they got a job in the mill. That was a pretty good job for back then. So. I can remember when I was working I actually worked in the clock room, which is kind of like a nerve center. I got this job because I don't know, I got it, but I got it. It was kind of neat because it was kind of an office job. There are people that had worked in that mill for 50 years. In other words, they went to work when they're 15 years old or younger. And here at that time, they had to retire at 65. So, I mean, nowadays, most people don't go to work till they're 18 or 20, and, they go to work till 62 maybe. But I got to meet some old guys that were pretty cool. I mean, they came from tough beginnings. In the old days, there were a lot of guys walking around with missing fingers and so on. And nobody's hearing was any good down there because nobody thought about protecting their ears. So if somebody was old and worked in the mill, they pretty much were different. You pretty much had to look at their mouth or make sure they could see your mouth. You were going to talk to them because they didn't know what the hell you're talking about half the time, which was pretty good sometimes to sell them something. You could kind of twist them a little bit. But anyway. If I could make some suggestions, is one, pick your friends very well. Because a lot of you will be held back by who your friends are. And I mean that seriously. I can remember walking to school and my best friend was whoever the hell was on the way. I mean, we became friends and I had some I thought really good friends in high school that just never reciprocate on anything. I had some so-so friends that I'm still friends 60 years later. And friends aren't the number you got, it's the quality. And if you can get one or two that are really good, I can tell you right now that I've got a couple of friends that if I was in a jail in Istanbul, Turkey, and I called up Jerry, he would send me $100,000 on a heartbeat, or he'd fly out and help me. But, I've got a couple relatives. I've got relatives. I don't have a large family. My father had 5 brothers and 1 sister, and I had 5 of my aunts and uncles had no kids. So my brother and I were kind of special. because they didn't have any kids. But I've got a couple relatives that would do anything. I mean, we would take care of each other. First of all, we know they aren't going to screw up and do something really stupid. I'm not going to catch them, whatever the hell is against the law, or whatever. But quality of your friends, and don't let your peers get you to do something you don't want to do. I mean, I look back, when we had a really neat class, a really tight class. I had Dennis Hayes, you probably know Earth Day Dennis. That's one of my friends, and he doesn't have a lot of friends because he was always on a different plane. I mean, he was up here. He taught me to read. I was going in the first grade. I just didn't care. I run around, had a good time, and he was really focused on things, and still a good friend of his, although he's so wrapped up in his environmental stuff. But you can't tell where people are going to go. But 50 years later, I look back and I say, oh, yeah, I can see why that one's in jail now, or I can see why that one did that. But look for people that got staying power. And it's interesting because some of the people that weren't the most popular kind of did their own thing, did really well, because their whole life they didn't let people maneuver them and talk them into something. They just kind of did their own thing, and God, you got your PhD, or you did that, or you did this, whatever. And I go, wow, because I know most of the people in my class. We've had some really interesting people, and but like I said, the ones that are really centered, they're not necessarily the wildest. No, it's people that they give you a word and they back it up. I've got like I said, I've got a couple of friends that are just phenomenal, and if you get something like that, whether it's a relative or a friend, you hold on to them. But the ones that reciprocate, the ones we have over for dinner, then they never have to get back or say hi or say thank you. After a while, you realize, okay, nothing wrong with them, but we just, we're not going to do something with them. We find people that reciprocate and so on. But it's we had a neat class, and like I said, I got a couple friends out of it. One of them, Jack Nispla, his dad. If you know J.D. Curry Camp. He was the first. J.D. Curry was kind of one of the big cheeses in Camas way back at the turn of the century. Well, Jack would have been his grandson, and he left in 7th grade. And I was on the internet to him last night on emailing because I went up and I take care of his mom and dad's grave because they're up here and he lives in California. But he's this neat guy, and he's one of those people that if I had a problem, he'd take care of me, and same with him. But neat guy. Well, let's see. I had my dad owned the hardware store, so can you imagine giving a kid 10 years old a Gilbert chemistry set that went like this? I had nuclear material. I had every jar. I had sulfur, to make stink bomb. It was a jar this big. I caught my folks' house on fire. We had to live in the. Anybody know what the inn was in Camas? Look up a picture. But in 1917, they built a huge hotel downtown Camas where Riverview Savings is, and that was for the strikers to have a safe place to. And that was kind of a neat place because they had a. When I was a kid growing up, they had the radio station down in the basement. In fact, Arnie McClaskey, who was the announcer as a high school kid, ended up being the radio announcer on the Disneyland, California, for years and years. But anyway, I caught my folks' house on fire when I was 10 years old. We had to live in the inn for. It's the only time I thought my dad was going to kill me. He said he was going to a lot of times, but this is the one I kind of thought there was some real, maybe I was really good for a while. But Camas was just a fun place. You get to ride your bike around, and the down in Lacamas Lake and down below Lacamas Creek below the lake, we used to go down there fishing all the time. And here my dad sold fishing licenses. So you think I know it's against the law. I go down there and fish all year round. I didn't know, just a kid. I go down there and come back late at night, dark and so on. But anyway, there was a lot of neat people. When I was in high school, there was a liaison. The mill had a professional artist that used to draw safety signs all by hand. And that's where Joe Papermaker, do they still talk about Joe Papermaker?
Yes.
Okay. Well, he came up with, his name was Frank Still. He was really quite good. He was like a cartoonist. But he was at our disposal. When my senior year, I could call him up and said, we would like to have this or this, and they would build things for us. We had a liaison, and the mill would bring up stuff. When we had a bonfire once. We used to play Washougal. That was a big game, last game of the year. And back then, Washougal was really good. They'd won like 33 games in a row. So we were good. We decided to have this bonfire. So we called up the mill, and they loaned us like 15 tons of paper to build this fire. And we put a full-size boat on the top of it. We lit it up, and that was the last one they ever had. They had the fire trucks up there. There was a guy named Price, and his dad owned the local garbage collection. So he loaned us 4 trucks, big trucks, to haul the stuff up. But we were innocent, but we weren't mean spirited. But we did a lot of stupid things, a lot of stupid things. But